Good morning, one and all, gathered here for the second day of the conference. We'll now start the day with free paper presentation. I welcome you all to the free paper presentation. The session will be chaired by Dr. Kumanan. Dr. Kumanan, Professor, HOD, Institute of Psychiatry, Madurai Medical College, past Secretary, IPS Tamil Nadu Chapter, current President of IPS Tamil Nadu Chapter. I welcome you, sir. Now Dr. Kumanan will take over the session.
Good morning all. Good morning all. I welcome all the postgraduate students for their paper presentation. Welcome Dr. Yamini. Are you ready with your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Yes, now you can present. Yeah. Your time is 5 minutes and we will have 2 minutes for discussion if there are any questions, and there will be a timer for you. Okay, you can start now. Go on.
Yes.
You have to share your presentation. Screen sharing. Okay. Yeah, it's visible. Go for a full screen. Okay, now it's clear. Okay.
Yes, sir. Shall I start, sir?
Yeah, go on.
Good morning to everyone present here. I thank the IPS 1000 members for giving me this opportunity. My title is Cross-Section Study on Prevalence of Stress, Anxiety and Depression, and Assessment of Quality of Sleep in IT Professionals who work from home during COVID-19 pandemic. And I thank my department members for helping me in the study. And to start with the introduction, we all know the coronavirus pandemic has resulted in changes to the working atmosphere of millions of employees who are now based at home and may continue to work from home in some capacity for the foreseeable future. This may have an impact on mental health due to various factors. In particular, the extended stay at home may contribute to general depressed and anxious feelings, leading to changes in routine sleep and eating habits. And more significantly, work from home saves daily commuting time and offers more flexibility to workers to take care of their families. This allows employees to choose working at times when they are more productive and can be beneficial for avoiding distractions from co-workers. A common area of concern in work-life boundary is balancing work-life schedules around other family members, where they need to take care of household chores and run errands in between to work on their meetings. And in some parents may choose to sacrifice their sleep at work and work at night and early mornings because these are the only times when they could concentrate on work and avoid interruptions. Ongoing work-family conflicts can lead to emotional exhaustion. Extended hours of screen exposure due to full-time computer screen can lead to fatigue, tiredness, headache, and eye-related symptoms. The aim of the study is to study the impact of COVID-19 work-from-home arrangement on IT professionals' mental health and to determine their anxiety, stress, depression level, and their quality of sleep to optimize their mental health and bring about modifications of working conditions. Method: the study was conducted through online method. A total of 60 IT professionals working under various software companies were included, and all participants were subjected to DAS 21, which is Depression, Anxiety, Stress Scale 21 questionnaire, and Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. The DAS 21 scale consists of depression, anxiety, stress scale 21 items. It's a set of 3 self-report scales designed to measure the emotional states of depression, anxiety, and stress. Each of 3 DAS 21 scale contains 7 items divided into subscales with similar content. Scores for depression, anxiety, and stress are calculated by summing the scores for the relevant items. The depression scale assesses dysphoria, hopelessness, anhedonia, and inertia. The anxiety assesses autonomic arousal, situational anxiety, and subjective experience of anxious. The stress scale is sensitive to levels of chronic, non-specific arousal. It assesses difficulty relaxing, irritability, being overreactive, and impatient. The interpretation is that in depression, when the level is below 9, it is considered normal, and 10 to 13 is considered mild depression, 14 to 20 is moderate, and 21 to 27 is severe, and more than 28 is extremely severe. And anxiety less than 7 is normal, and 8 to 9 is mild, and 10 to 14 is moderate, and 15 to 19 is severe, and more than 20 plus indicates extremely severe anxiety. When the score is 10 to 14, it is normal, and when it is 15 to 18, it is mild, and 19 to 25 is moderate, and severe 26 33, and when the score is more than 34 plus, it is extremely severe. The Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index is it contains 19 self-rated questions and 5 questions to be rated by the bed partner. Only the self-rated questions are taken into account. They are combined to form 7 component scores, each of which has a range of 0 to 3 points, with 0 indicating no difficulty and 3 indicating severe difficulty. The 7 component scores are then added to yield 1 global score with a range of 0 to 21 points, 0 indicating no difficulty and 21 indicating severe difficulty. And the components assess the sleep difficulty, use of medications to induce sleep, and daytime dysfunction, and other components are also added. And the inclusion-exclusion criteria are people working in various software companies are included, and those who are willing to participate in the study. And exclusion, those who are not willing to participate are excluded. The study was conducted through online questionnaire. IT professionals working under various software companies were included, and the sample size is 60. Duration of study was August and September 2021. Data were collected through online questionnaire. Data analysis was done by SPSS software version 26, and the results were conducted. The study was conducted with 60 IT professionals. And here the table shows the gender difference in stress, anxiety, and depression. In this table, it can be made out that the level of depression and stress is more among the female than the male, with statistically significant value of 0.04 for depression and 0.01 for stress. And there is no statistically significant difference in prevalence of anxiety and sleep quality among male and female. And this table shows the association of stress, anxiety, and depression with marital status. Here it can be seen that the level of depression, anxiety, and stress is more in married people than in unmarried people, with depression with the p-value of 0.03 and anxiety with a p-value of 0.05 and stress with a p-value of 0.01, all of which are significant. And this may be due to the increased responsibility and commitment to do household chores and inability to balance work and household chores. And here this table shows the association of working hours with depression, stress, and anxiety and sleep quality. Overall, it indicates that when the working hours are more, they are divided into 6 to 8 and 8 to 12, 12 to 14, and more than 14 hours. It can be made out from the table that when they work for more than 14 hours, their level of depression, stress, and anxiety are more, with statistically significant p-value of 0.01. And this slide shows the same. Post-hoc test, multiple homogeneous step test was conducted. And this table shows association between working hours and sleep quality. And it can also be made out that when the working hours is more than 14 hours, there is a statistically significant p-value of 0.04 in association with sleep quality. People with working hours of more than 14 hours have more severe sleep disturbance. In general, more the working hours, more severe is the disturbance in sleep quality. There is statistically significant correlation between working hours and sleep quality with p-value of 0.01. Discussion. This study was aimed to indicate the association between sleep quality, depression, anxiety, and stress with working from home condition. It is also found that depression, stress is more common among female and is statistically significant. Working from home may be more challenging for women since females tend to be more responsible for household and other home activities. The level of depression, stress, anxiety is more in married person, and this may be due to increased responsibility of taking care of children and the closure of other daycare centers. Work from home has led people to work for more hours than they previously did. Study shows more prolonged the working hours, and more is the increase in stress, anxiety, and depression. More severe is the sleep disturbance. Having a dedicated room for work, having an ergonomically correct workstation, knowledge of how to adjust a workstation were associated with lower chance of experiencing new health issues. Working in a dedicated room minimizes the chance of being distracted and interrupted. And these are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yamini. Just I want to ask, do the scales used have any other factors suggesting of any COVID-related grief in the family of the individuals, or any other events that could affect their mood status or can provoke anxiety? Do the scales have any of the items on the dash you said about the 21 item scale? Was there any indicators or any component assesses recent stress or recent, because this is a uniform stress throughout the world, the pandemic. So everybody had their own views regarding the illness. First of all, they were almost all of them were anxious because how to avoid contracting the illness and to spreading to others. And the illness was very severe, and it's also continuing till even now today also the UK, the COVID cases are rising, Russia rising. So I want to ask, what was the time you did this study? In the first COVID phase in 2020, or the recent second wave, the most devastating wave in April, May 21? When was the study conducted?
I did this in 2021, sir, August and September, recently.
Recently. So by that time it has come down, and most of them have become relaxed and vaccinated also. So do you think any changes in their perception of the condition and its effect on the mood and anxiety? Can it influence than the earlier phase? Have you gone through the earlier studies? I think last Tansegan also some papers were similar to this. Was there any comparison?
I went through, sir. Maybe the initial stages were very tough for them to accommodate to the work from home conditions, and now it has come down, sir.
Usually these are all new observations. So this is also a new novel situation for all of us. So if it is compared with the similar situation or any other situation that does not provoke severe anxiety or a little lesser than this, the study would be have its strength more. Okay, your presentation is adequate and satisfactory. Any questions from the floor or any Anybody online wants to have a question? I can allow 2 questions. Anybody? Okay, if there are no questions. Thank you, Dr. Yamini.
Thank you, sir.
One question is there. Please wait, please wait.
Yes, sir.
Is it a display? Okay. No questions. Thank you, thank you,
Thank you, sir.
thank you. Okay, now we go to the offline session, physical session. Dr. Narmada, I invite Dr. Narmada to present her paper on ECT and substance abuse in schizophrenia.
Good morning to everyone present here. So good morning to one and all present here. Today I am going to present a paper on does substance abuse use affect electroconvulsive therapy outcome in schizophrenia. So the study I have done in a tertiary care center Institute of Mental Health. It is a descriptive cohort study. Coming to introduction, as we all know, schizophrenia is one of the major psychiatric illness we encounter often with a prevalence of roughly 1% of population. And there are many modes of treatment of schizophrenia, and many antipsychotics has been used, of which 30% of patients fail to respond to those antipsychotic medications, for whom electroconvulsive therapy can be used as a mode of treatment. And there are also some studies show that 47% of patients in schizophrenia have either alcohol or some other drug use in their lifetime, compared to 16% of general population. So these are the following prevalence rate: cigarette smoking about 60 to 90%, and alcohol use about 21 to 86%, and cannabis about 17 to 83% in previous studies. So there were various explanations given for this, which are primary addiction hypothesis or two-hit hypothesis. So in this study, we aim at finding the effect of substance use on ECT given schizophrenia patients. So coming to materials and methods, I have did a prospective cohort study at Institute of Mental Health for about 1 year after getting the approval from the ethical committee. Here I have included patients who are diagnosed as schizophrenic based on ICD-10 criteria, for whom ECT was indicated as a mode of treatment, and the age which I have included was around 18 to 60 years, and those who are willing to give consent for the study. Exclusion criteria include patients with intellectual disability and patients with any other psychiatric illness other than schizophrenia. So in my study, I have included 40 male patients, and I have selected them based on consecutive sampling techniques for the entire study period based on this inclusion-exclusion criteria. And I have compared them with BPRS scores, both pre and post ECT level, with a standard deviation of 1.17 and 95% confidence level. So data collection, I have done a basic socio-demographic details and the baseline condition of the psychiatric illness, which was assessed by BPRS scale, and history of substance use. So I have used tests with chi-square test and Fisher's exact test. Chi-square I have used when the level of significance was more than or equal to 5, and when it was less than 5, I have used Fisher's exact test. And as I used BPRS score, it was a repeated measure. I have used ANOVA software. So results, coming to results, among the study participants, I have divided them into age criteria as 19 to 30 years, 31 to 40 years, 41 to 50, and 51 to 60 years. And all of them had a history of substance use in their lifetime, either alcohol or nicotine or cannabis, which I have given in the presentation. And roughly 57.5% of my sample size are having the substance use. So among alcohol users or cannabis users, nicotine users, and even tobacco users, the majority were coming on a 19 to 30 years of age, but the significant p-value was not significant, as all the other age groups were also having substance use. So coming to comparison of BPRS scores pre and post electroconvulsive therapy among alcohol users. We have come to a conclusion that they have significant reduction in BPRS score both pre and post ECT. Even in use of cannabis and nicotine users, there was significant reduction in post ECT BPRS scores. And coming to discussion, mental illness like schizophrenia and substance use are both common and debilitating conditions that frequently coexist in the same person. And suicidal ideation behavior common in people with schizophrenia. So the presence of alcohol dependence and nicotine dependence and tobacco and cannabis dependence have an impact on the outcome, and it was found to be statistically significant in our studies. But coming to limitations, here I have diagnosed the abuse and dependence was based on clinically. We did not use any objective scales to measure and quantify the use of any drug or alcohol use at the time of research, because the alcohol on brain have diverse influences, various variables have significance, like amount of alcohol consumed and at the age at which it begins, like that. So coming to conclusion, ECT is a highly effective treatment option for people suffering from schizophrenia and substance use, and the frequency with which patients use substances and the length of time they have been sick prior to receiving ECT are important factors in determining the relationship. Further research I recommend is to determine whether the duration of current illness and amount of substance use have an impact on effectiveness of ECT. Thank you, sir.
Okay, you wanted to study substance abuse effects in ECT, but I think the purpose is only partly served. And one more methodological flaw I noticed is you gave the distribution of type of substance used, the number of patients. I was missing, I thought a column is missing, the mixer type. See, you gave about nicotine use, alcohol use individually. All the patients were having only single substance use.
No, sir.
So you should include that also.
Okay, sir.
Then you should justify the reason why you wanted to study substance abuse having a deleterious or a beneficiary effect, or why you want to study the effect of substance abuse. Because before giving ECT, almost many drugs you have enlisted will lose their withdrawal effects, or will lose their capacity to cause withdrawal effects, except one or two, or there may be long-term changes. So how do they impair the outcome of ECT? You have to be very specific. Okay, the session is open for questions. Any questions? Online?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, now one more online presentation. I welcome Dr. Uma Devi to present. Oh, she is present. Yes. Prevalence of psychiatric morbidity in caregivers of COVID-19 patients. Okay. Your slides are visible, Dr. Uma Devi. You can start your presentation. You have 5 minutes for your presentation. You can start now. You have to unmute your, unmute and start. Your audio is not, your voice is not heard.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, now you are.
Am I on?
Oh, yes, you are audible. You can present. You can present. Go on.
Good morning, sir. The topic is psychiatric morbidity in spouses of patients with alcohol-related disorder. I thank my head of the department, associate professor, senior assistant professor, and senior resident for helping me doing this study. Introduction: alcohol is a common substance of abuse that causes both acute and chronic in almost all neurochemical systems. Current data from our country shows the prevalence of psychiatric morbidity significantly high among spouses of male with alcohol dependence. Alcohol abuse affects couples in a variety of negative ways. Major depressive disorder reports 43% of spouses. Depressive symptoms lead to a state of social withdrawal, which in turn leads to anxiety, despair, powerlessness, and cycle. Aim of this study is to evaluate the frequency and nature of psychiatric morbidity in wives of patients with alcohol dependence syndrome, to study the relationship between psychiatric disorder in wives with the severity of alcohol dependence. Methods: it's a cross-sectional observational study done by enrolling a total of 60 patients diagnosed with alcohol dependence and their wives. Patients were recruited by consecutive sampling method, meaning international neuropsychiatric interview to assess the psychiatric morbidity among wives, severity of alcohol dependence questionnaire to assess the severity of alcohol dependence among husbands. Inclusion criteria: adult male inpatient and outpatients with the diagnosis of alcohol dependence syndrome according to ICD-10 classification. Age of the subject is taken above 18 years. Comorbidity in husbands with nicotine dependence only. Husband and wife staying together. Exclusion criteria: medical and psychiatric disorders in the patients which are not related to alcohol use. Comorbid substance use. Other nicotine in husbands. Age less than 18 years. Participants' wives or patients' husbands having mental retardation or sensory impairment. Patients as well as spouses not consenting for the study. Mini International Neuropsychiatric Interview was designed as a pre-structured diagnostic interview. It is used to assess the 17 most common psychiatric disorder in DSM-5 and ICD-10. Rating is done the right of each question by circling either yes or no. SATQ questionnaire: the severity of alcohol dependence questionnaire is used to assess the severity of alcohol addiction. Contains 20 questions having 4 options. A score of 31 or high shows severe alcohol dependence. Score of 30 shows moderate dependence. Score of less than 16 shows mild dependence. Study center: patients taking treatment for alcohol dependence as outpatient and inpatient treatment at Mahatma Gandhi Memorial Government Hospital, Trichy. Sample size was 60. Duration of study from Jan 2021 to June 2021. Data collection: all data collection collected on social demographic performer. Data analysis: SPSS software version 16 used for data analysis. Results: a table containing frequency of alcohol use and psychiatric morbidity are used. Distribution of wives of persons with alcohol dependence as per age group. Age of wives less than 25 years was taken 15%, and 26 to 40 years taken 5%, 41 to 55 taken 25%, more than 55 years taken 5%. Distribution of alcoholic husbands as per severity of alcoholism as per SADD score. Low 1 to 9 was taken 25%, medium 11 to 20 taken 58%, and severe more than 20 taken 16.67%. Distribution of cases as per psychiatric morbidity. Depression was found in 38.33% of wives, and anxiety found in 23.33%, and psychotic disorder was nil, and phobia was 1.69%, and none was found in 36.67%. Association of duration of alcohol with psychiatric morbidity. Duration of alcohol with less than 5 years, psychiatric morbidity was no found psychiatric morbidity, and 6 to 10 years of duration of alcohol, 50% of psychiatric morbidity is found in wives, and 10 to 20 years of duration of alcohol, 85.2%. This shows that as the duration of alcohol increases, psychiatric morbidity also increases. P-value of 0.002. Association of severity of alcoholism with psychiatric morbidity. As per SADD score, low 1 to 9, the psychiatric morbidity is null, and medium it is 80%, and severe and it is 100%. Results: the mean age of persons with alcohol dependence and their wives was 36.25, and mostly second and third decade. As per SADD score, severe alcohol addiction seen in 16% of cases, medium and low or 58 and 25% respectively. Psychiatric comorbidities are seen in 63.33% cases. Most common psychiatric morbidity was depression, followed by anxiety, and phobia 1%. A significant association between the presence of psychiatric morbidity and duration of alcoholism, with p-value less than 0.05. A significant association between the presence of psychiatric morbidity and the severity of alcoholism. Conclusion: the finding of the present study draw attention to the fact that the mental health and quality of life of spouses is considerably poor and warrant attention. Hence, it is important that treatment programs for patients with alcohol dependence should also include a formal psychological assessment of their spouses. Understanding and addressing the mental health issues of spouses of alcoholics will not only decrease their burden, improve their coping skills, but also in treatment outcome of alcoholics. These are my references. Thank you, sir.
Okay. I am little confused. The topic topic doesn't mention about any alcohol, but most of the slides were focused on alcoholic husbands and they cause morbidity to caregivers. So you want to separate alcoholic husbands in this group separately, and you have dealt with other conditions, psychiatric morbidity conditions. So you can include them, or you can alter the topic. So the topic appeared prevalence of psychiatric morbidity in caregivers of COVID-19 patients, and predominantly it focuses on alcoholic husbands as the cause. Because in India there is no clear-cut demarcation of who is alcoholic or who is not an alcoholic. Going by Western standards is very difficult. So that becomes a weak link in this study. So that may create a wrong impression. Okay, the session is open for questions. Any questions? Online viewers? No. Okay, thank you, Dr. Umadevi. Next. Lavina. Okay. Now we go to the physical presentation. Dr. Lavina Shanmuganathan. Is she here?
She's doing it online, sir.
Okay. Here it's given as offline. Okay. She is going to present Rapunzel syndrome. Dr. Lavina, are you there? Yes. We are waiting for your audio, Dr. Lavina. Your slides are visible clearly. Your screen sharing is working. Yes.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, you share your slides. Yes.
Sir,
Yes.
today I'm going to present about the Rapunzel syndrome, which was helped by me, Assistant Professor Dr. Hariharan, Professor P. S. Subhashini, and Professor and Head of Department, Alexander Nyanadurai.
Go on.
Rapunzel syndrome is a rare manifestation. Trichotillomania is followed by trichobizarre, occurs when the swallowed hair strands extend beyond the stomach into the intestine as a tail. Wagon E.D. et al. Described this syndrome first in 1968. This syndrome is named after the long-haired girl Rapunzel in the fairy tale by Brothers Grimm. Since 1968, there has been only 64 documented cases in the literature. Trichobizarre commonly occur in young girls between 13 to 20 years of age with some psychiatric disorders, and almost half of the patients have the history of absurd trichophagia. A 13-year-old female who presented with abdominal pain and vomiting for 15 days. An abdominal sonography was done and radiology revealed a mobile mass on the stomach extending into the proximal bowel. An endoscopic examination was carried out which showed the stomach containing blacky hairy ball. She referred to psychiatry outpatient department for the complaints of irresistible urge to pull her hair and swallowed it. The patient family observed her of being involved in fussy behavior. They found her pulling hair from different parts of the head and started to swallow it, accompanied by build-up of tension and subsequent sense of relief for the past 2 years. She had an IQ test and the IQ score of 90, and mental age of 12 years and 8 months. Patient was diagnosed as trichotillomania with trichophagia. Finally, trichophagia removed through the laparotomy. Post-operatively, patient had started on tablet clomifene, started at 25 milligram for 4 to 7 days to achieve a target dose between 100 to 250 milligram per day. Along with these, started cognitive therapy along with habit reversible therapy of 8 sessions. Result of these interventions were suggestive of substantial reduction hair pulling incident. Discussion. Repulsion syndrome is a rare type of trichobazar. The instance of trichobazar is 0.4%. The history of trichotillomania is present in 50% of cases. Repulsion syndrome is not a primary surgical condition. Treating the underlying trichotillomania is critical in preventing the relapse. Repulsion syndrome requires a comprehensive long-term psychiatric follow-up. Serious complications can occur due to this condition. Hence, it's important to diagnose and treat it on early level. I have the following reference, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, you just you saved time for us. It is a case presentation. I want to ask you a question. You said that only 64 cases documented.
Yes, sir.
You know, probably I might have seen more than 10 cases in my practice, in my career. Probably I must be lucky. The rest might be 54 cases. Because why it is not documented means it is very common. In a general setup with a well-functioning pediatric department, we have an institute. I think Chennai will also have an institute. So it's very common. The other things, trichobazar, usually the pulled hair is swallowed. Pulled hair is swallowed, yes, and does not create problem for many. If they,
yes, sir.
Here, how did they find out patient had trichobazar? Because of our physical complaints of vomiting?
Yes, abdominal pain and vomiting, sir. And she referred from surgical department because of the parent history of swallowing of hair.
What was the duration for getting?
The duration is for 2 years, sir.
2 years. Why the parents were not taking her for care? Because this much of alopecia, everybody will be, any relative or any neighbor seeing the girl will suggest the parents that she has some problem.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is she from a very poor background?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any online questions? No online. Okay, thank you, Dr. Lavina, for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Offline or online? Offline. Now I call Dr. Pratibha. Dr. Pratibha is going to present her paper on More Than Meets the Eye, a case of Halloward-Spatz syndrome with intellectual disability. It's a physical presentation. Yes, go on.
Good morning, sir. I'm Dr. Pradeepa, second year PG from IMH. I'm going to present an interesting case of Halloward-Spatz syndrome with intellectual disability. So Halloward-Spatz syndrome is an autosomal recessive or sporadically occurring neurodegenerative disorder caused by defects in pantothenate kinase 2 protein, also called as pantothenate kinase associated neurodegeneration. PKN2 mutation results in axonal degeneration and iron accumulation in globus pallidus. Coming to case history, a 15-year-old female child was brought by her grandmother to psychiatric OPD for availing disability benefits. There was a history of temper tantrums, headbanging since childhood, increased for past 1 year, history of abnormal posturing, and unable to walk properly for past 1.5 years. Patient is the only child born of non-consanguineous marriage. Antenatal and natal events were uneventful, and there was a history of developmental delay was present, poor scholastic performance, attained menarche at 13 years of age, history of intellectual disability in an extended family member. Father separated from the family 7 years back, and mother is currently working in Bangalore, and the patient is staying with a maternal grandmother. So the patient presented with backward bending, gait disturbances, toe walking, dysarthria for past 1.5 years. Temper tantrums increased in the past 1 year in the form of irritability, refusal of food, crying spells, and headbanging behavior. Disturbed sleep for past 6 months. and there was a rapid progression of symptoms in the past 6 months. Presently, patient needs assistance in all activities of daily living. Patient is not ambulant, takes only liquid diet and needs assistance for self-care. Coming to CNS examination, there was cervical, finger and foot dystonia with decrease in dystonia on backward bending, hypertonia on all 4 limbs, power was normal and very brisk deep tendon reflexes. Unsteady gait, dysarthria and stuttering was noted, spine and cranium normal, cerebellum was normal and meningeal signs were absent. Mental status examination revealed increased psychomotor activity, inappropriate smiles, cheerful affect. Coming to investigations, routine blood investigations were normal, peripheral smear was normal, viral markers are negative, and thyroid function tests were within normal limits. 24-hour urine copper, serum ceruloplasmin, and serum copper were found to be within normal limits, and slit lamp examination revealed no KF ring or a cataract. Fundus examination revealed dull metal beaten appearance in both retina. MRI brain, T2 weighted MRI brain revealed eye of the tiger appearance in bilateral basal ganglia with central T2 hyperintensity and peripheral hypointensity. IQ is 62% based on BSMS and Stanford Binet Intelligent Scale, and there was a mild intellectual disability. Mental age is 2 years and 10 months with significant impairment in quantitative reasoning, fluid reasoning, and social and adaptive domain. So a clinical diagnosis of Hallowell-Sparks syndrome with intellectual disability and behavioral problems was arrived. Radiological findings and clinical picture correlates with the diagnosis. A neurophysician opinion was obtained and the dystonia was managed symptomatically by administering Botox injections. Around 300 units of Botox was administered. Psychoeducation to the family members regarding the illness was given, and psychotherapy to the patient in the form of environmental modification, parent skill training, positive reinforcement for maladaptive behavior was given. And the caregiver burden was assessed and supportive psychotherapy was given. Pharmacotherapy in the form of levodopa, carbidopa, trihexyphenidyl and benzodiazepines were given. So coming to discussion, the global prevalence of ID is found to be 1037 per lakh of population. Among that, PKAN is one of the causes. It is a rare neurodegenerative disorder. Its prevalence is 1 in 1 million. Neuropsychiatric manifestations include intellectual disability, non-specific behavioral changes, impulsivity, obsessive-compulsive features. Atypical PKN has onset in the second decade, which presents as mixed dystonia and Parkinsonism. These are my references. Thank you.
It's a straightforward case presentation. My doubt is, this is already diagnosed in the neurology department. It came for when it came for your assessment for intellectual functions, or you diagnosed by routine scan?
Sir, actually she had symptoms for 1.5 years. She didn't consult any neurologist. Their parents or a caregivers thought it to be a behavioral problem. I found it and I consulted with a neurologist and I followed up the case for past 3 months. Initially the patient was ambulant, now the patient is not ambulant.
No, you gave Botox. Which areas were managed with Botox? And what was clinical improvement? You said, did you follow up Botox?
Yes, sir.
Given to which group of muscles?
For a cervical group of muscles, Botox was administered, sir. And there was no significant improvement even with Botox injections, sir. The patient is progressively deteriorating, sir.
Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Online viewers? And no, I think no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Pradeepa.
We are done with the session, sir.
Thank you, participants and audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.